Today's video is brought to you by Squarespace. As a nearly entirely self-taught guitarist, these are the 7 biggest aha moments I've had in my 22 years of playing. As always, a follow-up video to this one will be going up over on Patreon if you want to come hang out after this lesson. So let's start with something super basic. You do not need to change scales for every chord. I was super intimidated by the idea of soloing or coming up with a lead part because I thought the name of the scale had to match up with the name of the chord. So G major chord, G major scale, A minor chord, A minor scale. And with the chords always moving so fast, there was no way my brain or fingers could keep up. So when I learned that I just needed to use the scale that connected those chords together, it felt like I had some kind of awakening. This connecting scale is just the key of the song. So the song is in the key of C major, then I play a C major scale. Think about when you sing a melody over some chords. The notes you're singing are just from this connecting scale. And it applies to the guitar the exact same way. I can take chords from the key of C major like F major, A minor, and G major, and just play notes from the C major scale. I didn't even put a C major chord in that progression, but because the key is what ties those chords together, the C major scale sounds awesome. Next up, you are always just 1 fret away from a right note. Now, I made an entire video dedicated to this rule if you want to deep dive on it, but you really only need to understand the basics. And the idea is that if you ever accidentally play a note that's outside the key, you are just 1 fret up or down from a note inside the key. The best way to understand this is to look at how keys are made. Let's start with all 12 repeating notes in music, every letter and every sharp or flat in between those letters. When we narrow those 12 notes down to the 7 notes in a key like C major, you can see that there's never more than 1 outside note in a row. When we apply this to our fretboard and play the C major scale, you can see how if I were to place my finger on any wrong note, I would just be 1 fret away from a right note. And if I expanded this all so we had every possible note from the key of C major across the entire fretboard, no matter where you went, you'd still never see a gap of more than 1 fret. And this would work the exact same way no matter what key I was in. Now, obviously knowing this theory is cool, but it's especially handy when you're soloing or jamming and you accidentally hit a wrong note. You now know that you just have to scooch your finger up or down 1 fret and you're good to go. It's all about the major scale. Nearly everything you'll ever learn can be traced back to the major scale. Chords, scales, modes, it all starts there. So this means that spending a ton of time building and connecting things to the major scale will almost always give you the best results. As for scales, the pentatonic scale is just a major scale with 2 notes removed. The natural minor scale is just a major scale starting at its 6th note. The Dorian scale is just a major scale starting from the 2nd note. Phrygian from the 3rd, Lydian from the 4th, Mixolydian from the 5th, and Locrian from the 7th. And now you know your modes. As for the chords, there are 7 naturally occurring chords in every key. And there are 7 notes in the major scale that share the exact same names that key is built on. I can play those chords for you and you can immediately tell that they fit together. And any random combination of those chords would give me a beautiful chord progression in the key of G major that I could play over with the G major scale. Connections make things stick. Have you ever spent hours, days, or even weeks trying to learn something new just for it to fade away once you move on to the next thing? Because I can't even begin to count how many times this has happened to me. What I found was that I had to be able to connect this new thing to something that was already a part of my core playing. Otherwise, I was just wasting my time. So to illustrate what I mean, let's take a quick concept and connect it to something we already know. And our concept will be that before landing on any minor chord, you can play a diminished 7th chord a half step below it. So we start by learning the diminished 7th chord shape, which looks like this. We'll make this a C diminished 7th, and the shape is just those 4 notes right there, and it's rooted, the lowest note here, on the C. So again, Now to make our connection, let's take a basic chord progression in the key of G major. It's called a 1-5-6-4 because it's based on those notes from the G major scale, and it's one of the most common chord progressions of all time. Well, we see that we have an E minor chord here, our 6th chord. And based on what we just learned, we know that we can play a diminished 7th chord a half step below it before we land on it. So a half step below an E minor would be an E flat or a D sharp, which is right here. That note right there, right before our E minor. So let's put our shape here. It would look like this. And now when we go to play our progression, we can slide this in there. Sounds really neat. And now you can actually use that concept you learned, and you'll find yourself actually working it into other progressions and ideas down the road. Whether you're looking to start a business, get your music out there, or basically anything else, having your own website is a must, and Squarespace has you covered. As you might already know, I just set up my own new website using Squarespace, and the whole process was so much easier than I thought it would be. Squarespace's design intelligence essentially gives you your own personal professional designer to help you create a site you'll love. Their built-in payment tools are top tier and easy to set up, and include all of the most popular payment options like Apple Pay, Klarna, and Affirm. And if you're looking to sell anything like courses or custom merch, you'll have all the tools to do that directly on your site too. So if you're ready to get started on your new website, head over to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/AndrewClarke to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That link will be in the description and in the pinned comment. Big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the lesson. The number system makes every key look the same. There are 12 major keys that you'll need to learn how to play in, and that can seem like a lot. But thanks to the way the fretboard works and something called the number system, we can actually make every single key look the exact same on our guitar. Now, there are a ton of ways to represent this, but an easy one is through something I call chord roadmaps, which show us where we can play every single chord no matter what key we're in. So let's use the key of G major for our example. And as we now know, the key of G major comes from the G major scale. If we write out those notes, we have G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. And if I played these notes in order, starting and ending on the G, it would sound like this. Our next step would be to give each one of these notes a number 1 through 7. Now, based on the number, we can get our chords by applying something called the major-minor formula. This formula tells us that chords 1, 4, and 5 are major, 2, 3, and 6 are minor, and 7 is diminished. If I now play these chords in order from 1 to 7, you'd now hear them flow together perfectly. Now to turn this into a movable roadmap, I would start by finding a G note on my low E string. So that would be right here. And then I would just put all of my other notes from the key across my low E and A string. So we've got G, which is 1, A, which is 2, B, which is 3. Then we go up to the next string for the 4, which is C, D is 5, E is 6, and then F sharp here for number 7. You can see that they're kind of right on top of each other just like that. So now, based on my major-minor formula, I know 1, 4, and 5 are major, 2, 3, and 6 are minor, and 7 is diminished. I can just play bar chord shapes that are rooted on each of these notes that we have that represent from the key. So major bar chord for 1, minor bar chord for 2, minor for 3, major for 4, major for 5, minor for 6, and then we've got the diminished shape here for our 7, the F sharp, and then we just resolve back on the G. Now, if I want to play in a different key, I would just shift the roadmap up or down the fretboard to get all 7 chords in this new key. I don't even need to know the names of these chords because I just think of them as numbers within this new key. So the key of A major, I just move things up so that the 1 is an A and the rest of the roadmap is automatically in position. So here would be our A, and our shape would actually look the exact same. So that would be 1, then we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I would apply the exact same bar chord shapes based on the numbers. So 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, and then we've got the diminish, just like that. And now I can move this around to whatever key I want and immediately have all the chords in that key thanks to their number. Relative keys cut your work in half. I touched on this a little earlier in this video, but a natural minor scale is just a major scale starting from the 6th note. So if we look at a C major scale, we have the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. If we start that scale from the 6th note, which is an A, we'd have an A minor scale, which means C major and A minor are relative scales and relative keys containing all the same notes and chords. This also means that if we learn to play in the key of C major, we're learning how to play in the key of A minor at the exact same time. And every other major key has its own relative minor key based on the 6th scale degree. So to illustrate this, let's pull up one of the most common A minor scales. And we position this A minor scale using our first finger and placing that on an A note. Now, since this scale has all the same notes as its relative major scale, that means that this scale would also work for C major. And if I just started on the C note, would literally become a C major scale. So rather than needing one shape to play an A minor scale and one shape to play a C major scale, we can use one scale shape to play them both. And this would go for any other connected scale shapes as well. As long as it's A minor or C major, they're gonna have the exact same notes in them. Last up, all scale positions are basically the same thing. So you might have heard about the whole 5 pentatonic positions thing, where you have these 5 different shapes you have to learn moving up the fretboard. Well, we know that scales don't actually have that many notes in them. A major or minor scale is just 7 notes, and a pentatonic scale is just 5 notes. This means that each one of these scale positions is just repeating the same notes over and over. So if we go to something like the A minor pentatonic scale and actually look at the notes we're playing in position 1, we can see that we're essentially playing through this scale 2.5 times. Well, when we move to the next position, we're just playing more of the same notes. We start at a different point in the scale, but the notes are the same and the order is the same. Those 5-note cycles are just gonna start and end a little further up in pitch. Now, there's still value in being able to cover more of the fretboard or reach higher and lower octaves of those same notes, but it just kind of shows you that you don't need to be comfortable with all 5 positions to create great melodies. It's much better to become a master with 1 or 2 shapes than it is to be mediocre with all of them equally. So we're heading over to Patreon from here to keep talking about this stuff. If you want to join us, you'll find a link to my Patreon in the description. Alternatively, this video on what I did to actually get good at guitar would be a great next step. I'll put links to all of that stuff in the middle of the screen for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.